History is a nightmare from which I am trying to awake. James Joyce wrote that, and it just perfectly captures a feeling I think we've all had at some point, right? That sense that the world and our tiny little place in it is built on something shaky, something chaotic. It's a feeling that one author decided to confront head on, embarking on this incredible journey to find some solid ground in a world that felt like it was falling apart. And that's the story we're going to dive into today. So, we're looking at one person's really profound personal journey. This is a story about what happens when the maps you use to navigate life, the ones you thought were reliable, just completely fall apart. And the big question is, how in the world do you build a new one from all that wreckage? So, where does a story like this even begin? Well, it starts with the total disintegration of a worldview, a crisis that, honestly, many of us face when the beliefs we were raised with just don't seem to hold up anymore. He describes his childhood as being pretty stable, even happy. It wasn't some dogmatically religious home, not at all, but it was absolutely steeped in the cultural leftovers of Judeo-Christian morality. These background ideas about good and evil, responsibility, the value of truth. It gave him this unspoken set of rules, like a predictable game that everyone around him was implicitly playing. But then, as a young adult, that whole foundation just crumbled. The core ideas of Christianity started to seem, well, absurd to him, and he couldn't find anyone who could give him a compelling intellectual defense for them. So he threw it all aside, and, like so many others looking for answers, he found a really powerful replacement: political ideology. Socialism gave him a new, crystal-clear map. All of a sudden, every bad thing in the world had a single source: economic injustice, and he had a heroic role to play in fixing it. But this new belief system, it also started to show some pretty serious cracks. He began to see a really dangerous temptation inside it, this powerful desire to change other people. And he realized, hey, this isn't just a flaw in socialism. Any ideology that's all about changing others, instead of focusing on changing yourself, was something to be deeply suspicious of. So, with his childhood faith gone and his new political ideology in ruins, he was completely lost. No map, no direction, just adrift in a sea of confusion. And this led him into a period of really profound personal crisis, a journey into the absolute darkest parts of human nature, and his own. As part of his psychology studies, he ended up visiting a maximum security prison. Now, this wasn't some theoretical exercise from a textbook. He was suddenly physically surrounded by men who had done the most terrible things you can imagine. The abstract concept of evil was about to get terrifyingly real. And the shock was just profound. The very man who guided him safely out of a tense situation, a guy who seemed totally harmless, even reasonable, he had this horrifying past. He had murdered 2 policemen after making them dig their own graves, and one of them had begged for his life for the sake of his kids. I mean, how do you even process that? The experience left him with this unbearable question. How could someone who seems so normal, so inconsequential, be capable of such absolute evil? That comfortable line we all draw between good people like us and bad people like them, for him, it just dissolved. And then the horror turned inward. He started getting this recurring, really powerful urge in his lectures to just stab the person in front of him with his pen. Here he was, a guy who'd never been aggressive in his life, and now he was having these thoughts that felt monstrous. He was becoming terrified of his own mind. He tried to really truly imagine what it would be like to be one of those violent prisoners, and the revelation was absolutely terrifying. He wasn't qualitatively different from them. The potential for that kind of horror wasn't in some far-off alien monster. No, it was easy. It was right there, inside him. This whole personal collapse hit its peak in a year of these apocalyptic nightmares. Just vivid, terrifying dreams of nuclear war and total devastation night after night. The chaos he was seeing in the world had completely and totally invaded his inner life. For him, history had literally become a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. But right there at the bottom of all this chaos, a new principle started to emerge. And it wasn't some grand new theory or a complicated ideology. It was something way smaller, way more personal. It was just a voice. He started hearing this little inner voice, commenting on almost everything he said. And it wasn't dramatic or accusatory. It was just this calm, matter-of-fact statement. You don't believe that. That isn't true. He was being confronted moment to moment with the fact that he was constantly saying things he didn't truly stand behind. So he began this little experiment. He decided he was only going to say things that this internal critic would let pass. I mean, can you imagine? This meant stopping mid-sentence, feeling embarrassed, reformulating his words until they actually felt true. It was this painstaking process of filtering every single falsehood out of his own speech. And the result? It was astonishing. He started to feel less agitated, way more confident. He had this huge realization that his true self wasn't the part of him that was just spouting all these unexamined opinions. It was the part that was criticizing them. This commitment to telling the truth became the bedrock, the one solid thing on which he could start to rebuild everything. Okay, so with this brand new tool, Speak Only the Truth, he could actually start to map the world again. But this map wasn't about politics or religion in the old sense. Nope. This was about the fundamental structure of human experience itself. He identified two primary domains we all live in. The first is what he calls order, or the known. Think of this as explored territory. It's our culture, our traditions, our shared understanding of how things work. It's the map we already have. It's familiar, it's stable, and it's predictable. It's the city we live in with all its walls and rules. And the second domain? That's chaos, or the unknown. This is everything outside the city walls, is everything that doesn't fit on our current map. Now, it's the source of all new information, all creativity and potential, but it's also the source of threat and fear and things falling apart. So where did he find the guide for navigating between these two massive forces? In the oldest stories humanity has ever told. He realized that ancient myths aren't just primitive science, they are maps of meaning. And that universal figure of the hero, the one you see in every culture, that's the person who stands on the border between order and chaos, who voluntarily confronts the unknown to bring back something of value, and in doing so, rejuvenates a culture that has grown old and rigid. So what does all this mean for you and me? This whole journey from chaos back to meaning? It actually reveals a path, a way of being in the world that is both incredibly deep and, at the same time, intensely practical. The way forward is really built on these core principles. First, voluntarily confront what you're afraid of and what you don't understand, instead of just avoiding it. Second, commit to truthful speech and abandon ideology and all those little falsehoods. And third, accept your individual responsibility. It's up to you in your own life to be that mediator between order and chaos. And why does any of this matter? Because the alternative is absolutely terrifying. This path, this whole process, is the source of meaning in life. And as this quote makes so clear, meaning isn't some luxury. It's the instinct that keeps us alive. When we abandon that pursuit of meaning, all that's left is resentment, nihilism, and a desire for destruction. We'll end with this incredibly powerful quote from the Gospel of Thomas. It's both a challenge and a warning. That journey into the unknown parts of yourself and the world, it's not optional. The potential that's lying dormant inside of you, it has to be brought out into the world. If you do it voluntarily, it will be your salvation. But if you don't, it will fester and turn against you, and that will be your destruction.